She never told him, not once. Every Friday when he handed over the housekeeping envelope, she counted it at the kitchen table, divided it into what he expected her to spend, and quietly put the rest somewhere he would never think to look. Your grandmother was not dishonest. She was prepared. And the 10 tricks she used to protect her family without her husband ever knowing saved them more times than he ever understood. Subscribe, let us count down. Item 10. The housekeeping envelope margin. Before direct debit made household money invisible, your grandmother received a weekly housekeeping allowance from her husband every Friday, typically between £2 and £4 in a working-class household in the 1950s. He expected her to feed, clothe, and maintain the family on that amount. What he did not know was that she had spent the previous week finding ways to spend less than last week. Every penny she saved from the housekeeping stayed in her apron pocket and never went back. She calculated her margin not in pounds, but in small daily decisions. The cheaper cut of meat, the day-old bread, the vegetable she grew rather than bought. The margin she built over a year was frequently enough to cover a family emergency without a single penny of debt. Your grandfather never knew it existed. Item 9. The Post Office Savings Book. Before high street banks required a husband's written authorization for a married woman to open an account, a practice that persisted until the Sex Discrimination Act of 1975, your grandmother banked at the post office. The Post Office Savings Bank, established under the Post Office Savings Bank Act of 1861, allowed any individual, including married women, to open and operate their own savings account independently. Every Tuesday morning, while her husband was at work, she walked to the post office and deposited whatever she had saved from the housekeeping that week. He never saw the book. She kept it behind the kitchen clock or tucked inside her best hat. By 1960, over 20 million post office savings accounts were active in Britain. A significant number belonged to women their husbands believed had no savings at all. Item 8. The emergency tin behind the clock. Every working-class British kitchen had one. A biscuit tin, a tea caddy, or a small tobacco tin tucked behind the mantelpiece clock or pushed to the back of the highest kitchen shelf. Your grandmother called it the emergency money. Her husband called it the housekeeping. He was wrong. The emergency tin was her creation, her system, and her protection. It contained exactly enough to cover the rent for 1 month, a week's food, and a doctor's bill. Nothing more, nothing less. She replenished it first before anything else in the household was paid for each week. The building societies and banks that replaced this system through the 1970s and 1980s offered savings accounts with interest but required joint signatures in most working-class households. The tin required nothing and answered to no one. Your grandmother trusted it more than any bank. Item 7. The Neighbour Money Circle. Pattern break. In working-class Britain in the 1950s, there existed a financial institution that no bank knew about, no government had authorized, and no husband had been told of. It was run by women for women, on every street in every industrial town in the country. It had different names in different areas. In parts of Yorkshire it was called the Diddlem. In the West Midlands it was the Tontine. In parts of London it was simply the Circle. The system was always the same. 10 women on a street each contributed 1 shilling every week to a central pot kept by the most trusted woman in the group. Every week one woman received the full pot, 10 shillings, on a rotating basis until every woman had received her payout once. Then the circle began again. No interest, no fees, no paperwork, no bank involvement, no husband's knowledge required. What these women had created was a rotating credit and savings system that financial economists now formally recognize as a ROSCA, a rotating savings and credit association. The same system has been independently developed by women's communities in West Africa, the Caribbean, South Asia, and East Asia across centuries of financial exclusion. The Consumer Credit Act of 1974 introduced licensing requirements for any regular lending arrangement that brought informal money circles into legal complexity for the first time. The last formally documented British street money circle was recorded in a sociological study of working-class women in Wolverhampton in 1983. What those women built without a single financial qualification between them is now studied in development economics as one of the most efficient, small-scale financial systems ever devised. Your grandmother never needed a bank. She had her neighbours. Item 6. The second housekeeping book. Before spreadsheets and budgeting apps, your grandmother kept 2 housekeeping books. The first was the one she showed her husband every Friday when he asked where the money had gone. It was accurate, detailed, and showed exactly what he expected to see. The second book was kept in her sewing basket under the fabric scraps. It recorded what she had actually spent, what she had actually saved, and what was actually in the emergency tin. The gap between the 2 books was not dishonesty. It was the only financial privacy available to a woman whose husband controlled every penny that entered the household. The Married Women's Property Act of 1882 had given British women the legal right to own property and keep their own earnings. What it had not given them was financial equality inside a working-class marriage, where the husband handed over a weekly allowance and expected an account of every penny. Your grandmother kept her own account. She just kept it to herself. Item 5. The clothing budget trick. Before fast fashion made new clothing cheap, your grandmother was given a specific clothing allowance for the family. She spent roughly half of it. The rest she saved in a separate envelope kept inside her winter coat pocket, the one place in the house her husband never searched. She stretched the clothing budget through a system of alterations, exchanges with neighbours, market purchases, and the careful dismantling of worn garments for their buttons, zips, and usable fabric. A dress that was too worn to wear became the fabric for a child's pinafore. A worn shirt became cleaning rags. Nothing left the house as waste if it still had a use. The fast fashion industry, led by chains including Primark, which opened its first British store in Derby in 1973, systematically made repair and alteration economically uncompetitive within a generation. The clothing envelope in the winter coat disappeared with it. Your grandmother clothed her family for half what her husband thought it cost. Item 4. The Christmas Club. She ran herself. Every October, your grandmother began collecting a small fixed amount from 6 of her neighbours every week, typically 6pence each, and kept the accumulated pot in a dedicated envelope inside her post office savings book. By the first week of December, she had enough to cover every household on the arrangement for a modest Christmas. Presents for the children, the Christmas meat, the decorations, without a single penny of credit or debt. She organised, administered, and delivered this system entirely without her husband's knowledge or involvement. He assumed Christmas was paid for from the housekeeping. It was not. It was paid for by 10 weeks of sixpences collected at the back door every Thursday morning while he was at work. Your grandmother ran a financial services operation from her kitchen table that her husband thought was just neighbours having tea. Item 3. The bulk market run. Every Saturday morning at 6 o'clock, before the market stalls had finished setting up, your grandmother was already there. Not to shop at the prices on the boards, to wait. By 11 o'clock, stallholders with perishable goods, fruit, vegetables, meat, bread, began reducing prices to clear stock before the end of trading. She bought nothing before 11, everything after 11. A family that shopped at Saturday market closing prices spent between 30 and 40% less on fresh food than a family that shopped at opening prices from the same stalls. Her husband gave her the housekeeping on Friday. He had no idea that she routinely spent a third less than he had provided and kept the difference. The expansion of supermarkets with fixed prices and refrigerated storage through the 1960s and 1970s ended the closing time market discount by making 7-day fixed-price food the British retail standard. Your grandmother was at the market at 6 on Saturday mornings because the arithmetic worked. She never told her husband why. Item 2. The repair before the replace rule. Before your grandmother bought anything new, she repaired what she had for as long as it could possibly be repaired. Shoes were resoled, pots were retinned, mattresses were turned and restuffed. The sewing basket beside her chair was not a hobby. It was a maintenance system. She kept needles, thread in 6 colours, a darning mushroom, spare buttons sorted by size and colour into a biscuit tin, a bodkin, and a small pair of very sharp scissors that nobody else in the house was permitted to use. The average British household today replaces rather than repairs almost every domestic item according to the Waste and Resources Action Programme's household consumption data. Your grandmother's repair rule was not poverty. It was the systematic refusal to spend money that did not need to be spent. Every repair she made was money that went into the emergency tin instead of into a shopkeeper's till. Her husband never noticed because nothing in the house ever appeared worn out. That was the point. Item 1. Manifesto Close. This is not a list of deceptions. It is a portrait of resourcefulness under constraint. Your grandmother did not hide money from her husband because she was dishonest. She hid it because the law gave her no other option. Until 1975, a British woman could not open a high street bank account in her own name without her husband's permission. Until 1975, she could not apply for credit independently. Until 1975, the entire architecture of British financial life assumed that a married woman's money belonged to her husband. Your grandmother built her financial independence inside those constraints with a biscuit tin, a post office savings book, a second housekeeping ledger, and 10 neighbours who met every Thursday morning at the back door. None of it required a financial advisor. None of it required a bank. None of it required her husband's knowledge or permission. It required only the understanding that a family's security is built in the small decisions made quietly every week by the person who actually runs the household. Your grandmothers knew all of this. We forgot it in a single generation because forgetting was profitable for someone else. None of this is gone. It just went quiet. It is time to start listening again. This week, find a tin and put it somewhere in your home that only you know about. Start with whatever you can spare. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 tricks your grandmother actually used. Because I promise you somebody in your family knew every last one of them. That knowledge did not die. It just went quiet. It is time to start listening again.